Everyone said it was just a joke. My best friend, my husband, me, the whole backyard full of people laughing over paper plates. How do you explain to anyone that the funniest line you ever said in public was also the one that followed you through a sealed envelope, a lab appointment, and a waiting room you did not choose? I laughed the loudest, I always do, but I never stopped to wonder what a quiet man does with a joke that everyone already heard. My name is Thessaly Mare. I am 31 years old, and I work the front desk at Perrin Family Dentistry, which means I am the first person every patient sees and the last voice they hear when they confirm their appointment. I am good at this, good at reading a room, good at making people feel settled before anything difficult happens to them. My husband Joel calls it a gift, and he says it with genuine admiration, though lately the admiration has the same quality as something stored in the back of a cupboard, still there, but not reached for. Joel is 35 and a civil engineer, and his brain is organised the way his desk is organised. Everything in its correct place, everything load-bearing. I met him at 26 and married him at 27, and for most of the years between those 2 points, I thought reliability was the same as security. I still think it is, mostly. I just also think reliability, applied with enough precision and not enough lightness, can make a person feel like a structural element rather than a wife. Kieran Lau has been my best friend for 9 years, since university, and he is the kind of person who makes every room feel less serious without making it feel less real. He is 33, a graphic designer, with a narrow jaw and wide hazel eyes, and an easy laugh. He has known Felix since before Felix was born. Felix is 3 now, with a yellow dump truck he carries everywhere, and the same hazel eyes as Kieran, which people have casually mentioned before, the way people mention things that seem harmless. On a Tuesday afternoon in late June, the 4 of us were at the community playground on Harrow Lane. Me, Joel, Felix, and Kieran, who arrived 20 minutes in carrying a takeaway coffee and the exact toy Felix had been asking about since the previous Tuesday. Kieran held Felix up at arm's length, and one of the playgroup mothers said Felix really did not look much like Joel, and Kieran said he had been meaning to talk to someone about that for a while. The pavilion group laughed. I laughed, the loudest and longest. Joel stood 4 meters away at the water fountain and held his bottle with both hands and did not laugh. I told myself he had never been good at playgrounds. That evening, Joel asked if they could talk. I set the plates down and waited. He asked his question with the reasonable tone of someone who had spent the afternoon deciding how to phrase it carefully. He wanted to know how often Kieran visited the house during the hours when Joel was at work, and he said it explicitly. He was not making an accusation, but that Kieran had arrived at the playground with the correct toy, the one Felix had specifically requested the previous Tuesday, and that level of knowledge required either recent conversation or very regular contact, and he would like to know which it was. He asked her to name, if she could, how many times in the past 2 months Kieran had been inside the house when Joel was not there, and whether she considered that a normal pattern for a family friend. He named the toy, held up from across a playground by a man who had not been told what to buy. I told him the question was both insulting and boring, which is the most efficient dismissal I know. I told him Kieran had been my closest friend since I was 22 years old, 6 years before I met Joel, and that his problem was not really about Kieran. It was about the fact that I had an independent social life that did not place him at the centre. He said he had heard me, but he had asked a specific question, and my answer had not contained the answer to it. I said I had already answered him. I turned back to the plates. He came back with the second part, quieter and without heat. He said he was not asking for the friendship to end, but for a clear arrangement, planned visits, known times, the friendship visible and shared rather than something he only heard about afterward. He offered a dinner, him and Kieran and me at the same table, the friendship made transparent rather than something he had to deduce from a toy at a playground. He said he was not making a demand, and he used the word invitation. I said I was not going to schedule a dinner to justify a 9-year friendship to my own husband, and I went to check on Felix. Felix was asleep in his cot with the truck against his chin. I stood in the doorway and felt entirely correct. Before I went to bed, I passed Joel's phone on the counter, and the screen lit for half a second with a calendar notification that read, Ridgeline, Tuesday, 11 a.m. I told myself it was a site visit and went upstairs. 2 days later, at work, I told Bex the playground story at the reception desk between appointments. I performed Kieran's joke with the timing it deserved and did Bex the favour of also imitating Joel's face. The stillness, the careful precision with the water bottle cap, the look of a man who has just had something confirmed. Bex said he sounded exhausting. I agreed. I said men who cannot handle their wives having male friends are the kind of men their wives eventually stop respecting. A patient check-in chime cut the conversation short. Behind us in the treatment prep corridor, Petra Henshaw carried a sterilisation tray past the reception area without pausing. On Thursday morning, I was at the desk in a 4-minute window between calls, and I sent a message to the group thread, me, Kieran, Andy, and 2 university friends, saying that Kieran was officially Felix's backup daddy. Because if Joel ever figured out how to get on the floor and play trucks, Felix would have had a decade of practice with someone more qualified. The thread responded warmly. Andy wrote that backup daddy energy was a certified role. Kieran replied that he had already ordered the mug. The timestamp on my message was Thursday, 11:47 a.m. What I did not know was that Andy, forwarding a separate piece of the thread to a birthday planning group that afternoon, included the exchange by accident. The birthday planning group included Joel's co-worker Harpreet. Harpreet forwarded it to his wife. 36 hours later, by a route connecting 3 degrees of social network, the screenshot reached Joel's phone. Joel showed it to me on Saturday morning in the living room, while Felix watched cartoons on the sofa and the wooden train set spread across the rug. He told me what had happened with Harpreet, the co-worker, the professional desk, the casual question about his son's paternity. He named the timestamp 11:47 a.m. on a Thursday, and asked what she had been doing in those 4 minutes when she had told him she had a quiet morning at work. He asked whether the phrase backup daddy was chosen casually or deliberately, because a casual choice does not need an audience with mutual connections, but a deliberate choice requires a reason, and he would like to know the reason. I said the screenshot had been forwarded without my consent, and the person responsible for the situation was the person who forwarded it, not the person who wrote an innocent message in what she believed was a closed thread. I said his decision to hold the screenshot across the kitchen as if it were evidence told me more about his surveillance instincts than about any problem with my friendship. I said backup daddy was clearly comedy, understood by everyone in that thread as comedy, and that a husband who needs his wife to explain her jokes was not functioning as a partner, but as a supervisor with domestic jurisdiction. His second attempt came without any shift in volume. He asked once more, plainly, would she tell him whether Kieran's visits during working hours were something she could describe openly? He offered the dinner again, not as a demand, and he used the word invitation a second time. I said I was not going to schedule anything to justify a friendship that predated this marriage, and I put my coffee mug in the sink. That evening, Dottie Henshaw walked her grey terrier along the footpath behind the Harrow Lane Gardens and looked through the gap in our back gate and observed Kieran's slate-grey hatchback parked in the driveway at 6:14 p.m. She noted the time. The car stayed 43 minutes before the kitchen light went off and the curtains were drawn. Dottie had now observed the car on the driveway 7 times in 3 months, and she wrote the date in the notebook she kept from 30 years of habit, at the top of a page with room for more. On Joel's phone that night, briefly visible before he picked it up, Cornerstone, Thursday, 4 p.m. I told myself another site visit. In bed, I opened my messages and told Andy that Joel had found the screenshot and was being theatrical. I sent a laughing emoji. She replied after 4 minutes, "Are you okay?" No laughing emoji at the end. I typed back, absolutely. I put the phone face down and heard Joel's laptop opening somewhere downstairs. Kieran held his BBQ in mid-July at his backyard on Elm Grove Road. 2 folding tables under a yellow check cloth, a charcoal grill against the back fence, the smell of sunscreen and lighter fluid, and cut grass carrying over from next door. 14 people filled the terracotta patio. Me, Kieran, Andy, and her new boyfriend Marco, 3 couples from Kieran's design network, Naomi and her partner Dex, 2 women from my playgroup, a neighbour of Kieran's called Gus, and Joel. Joel brought a 6-pack of craft beer and arrived exactly on time. He set the beers beside the drinks cooler and exchanged a short, genuine handshake with Kieran, the kind that takes nothing back and gives nothing away. Felix was happy in a travel playpen in the corner with his yellow truck and a set of foam blocks, completely unbothered by any of it. The afternoon light sat long and gold across the patio tiles, and the chatter of 14 people in a good mood filled the space between the fence posts. I was precisely where I wanted to be. Kieran was at the grill telling a story about a client who had rejected a complete design package because the font was not, in the client's exact words, emotionally appropriate. The group was laughing in the generous way of people with enough distance from their own clients to find other people's clients amusing. Naomi had her phone out and was recording pieces of the conversation to share with a colleague on Monday. Joel stood at the edge of the group with his beer and listened without performing, which was how he always participated in social gatherings. Present, attentive, not adding. Cara, one of the playgroup mothers, crouched beside Felix's playpen and said he was absolutely the most beautiful child, and asked whether his eye colour came from Joel's side. There was a natural social pause, the kind that functions as an invitation, and Kieran turned from the grill and said he had actually been wondering about that himself for about 3 years now. The group laughed at the setup. I read the room's energy the way I read the appointment schedule, efficiently and without error. I had the full version of the joke and I gave it to the backyard. I said Kieran brought Felix the right toy every single time without being told, which Joel had not managed in 3 years. I said if parenting were a graphic design brief, Kieran would be the creative concept and Joel would be the legal footnote in 6-point font at the bottom of the page. I delivered it with my usual timing, the chin tilt, the pause before the punchline. Most of the group laughed. Marco laughed generously. Andy's smile arrived without reaching her eyes. Naomi's phone was still recording. In the right edge of the frame, without any of us knowing it yet, Joel's face held steady for 11 seconds. The still expression, the craft beer bottle coming to rest at his side without a sound, one hand reaching into Felix's playpen to lift the yellow truck from the foam block pile, examining it. He said nothing. I was too engaged in the laughter to register any of this. On the drive home, Felix slept in his car seat with the truck on his lap, and Joel drove without speaking. I called the silence sulking in my own mind, which I knew he hated, but the thought functioned the same way the word would have. At home, Joel carried Felix upstairs and placed the truck in its exact position on the shelf beside the cot, with the precision he brought to everything. The lavender diffuser ran at its usual speed. I stood in the hallway and looked at the side table where we kept the house keys, mail, and a small ceramic bowl Felix had painted at a birthday party craft station, dark blue with a white handprint on the side. The bowl held 2 spare keys and a folded receipt from the pharmacy. Nothing about any of it looked like a turning point. The 4th step of the staircase made its familiar creak as Joel came back down the hall toward me. He said he was not going to make a scene, and he said it quietly because Felix had just gone down. He told me he had stood 4 feet behind me when I called him a legal footnote in front of 14 people, including his sister. He asked her to explain, not rhetorically but specifically, what purpose that line served in that particular company. His question was clean and scene-tied. He asked whether, if he had said to those same 14 people in her presence, with his sister recording, that another woman brought Felix the right toy every time, and she was the legal footnote, she would have described that as a joke. He asked for the honest answer to that question. I told him the situations were not equivalent, and his comparison was absurd, because men and women did not operate under the same social conditions, and his sense of grievance about a barbecue comment was not the same category of experience. He did not argue the equivalence. He said the jokes stop, not the friendship, not Kieran's presence if that presence was transparent, but the specific pattern of public jokes about Felix's parentage, because those were not jokes under any framing a third party would apply. He said this was not a request, and he would not repeat it. He offered one final thing: couples counselling, or a mediator of her choosing, before he decided what came next. I said I was not going to sit across from a counsellor to defend my sense of humour at a backyard barbecue. He said that was her choice. He went into the bedroom and closed the door. I went downstairs to the kitchen and made tea. My phone buzzed 3 times in quick sequence. Naomi's name on the screen. She said she had looked at the BBQ clip that evening and was sorry to do it this way, but she had already sent it to Joel, and she thought he should hear the full audio. My tea went cold on the counter. I did not reply to Naomi. I stood looking at the refrigerator, where Felix's crayon drawings were held with round magnets, trucks, suns, a house with 4 windows. Between 2 drawings was a small piece of card I had made during a playdate the previous spring, written in my own black marker. The word Kieran, surrounded by a sun I had drawn myself. I had genuinely forgotten it was there. Through the ceiling above me, the soft file-received chime from Joel's laptop played once, and then the room above fell completely quiet. The following Monday, Joel had taken the afternoon off because I was scheduled until 5, and he was at the Sunridge Daycare chain-link fence for pickup, standing in the mild afternoon with his jacket on and his phone in his pocket. Felix was still inside finishing a drawing. Ms. Prout came to the gate and asked if she could speak with him for a moment. She said that during circle time that morning, when the group leader asked each child to name their family, Felix had said Mummy, then Daddy Joel, then Daddy Kieran, in that sequence, naturally and without any sign of confusion, as if all 3 names belonged together in the same sentence. She said she recorded these observations as standard safeguarding practice and wanted him to be informed. He thanked her and asked whether the record was in Felix's daily file. She said yes. Felix came through the gate holding a rolled drawing, a truck with a driver behind the wheel. Joel took his hand. He picked up Felix's laminated Daycare ID card from the sign-in tray out of habit, looked at it for a moment, the photo in the top right corner, the full name beneath, and slid it into his jacket pocket. He told me that evening in the living room, calmly and without staging. I sat beside him and tried something different. I dropped the mockery, and I dropped the moral positioning entirely and used the vocabulary of self-awareness in their place. I said I needed to acknowledge that the jokes had been a way of managing my own feelings about the marriage rather than a statement about Felix's parentage. I said I had felt disconnected for a while, and the humour had been a coping mechanism for something I should have addressed with Joel directly. And I said I loved our family and did not want to lose it. I offered specifically to reduce Kieran's visits to planned group occasions only, never alone with Felix, and to speak with a counsellor together if that was what Joel needed. I delivered all of this softly, and with the deliberate calm that can, under certain conditions, be mistaken for honesty. Joel listened to every word. Then he asked, using the daycare as his anchor point, what the right interpretation was when a 3-year-old volunteered the name Daddy Kieran during a structured family naming exercise at daycare, in front of his entire Bluebirds group and a safeguarding-trained teacher who had now filed a written record of the statement. He asked what she would like him to think that explanation was. I said Felix heard the jokes and repeated the vocabulary, because that is what children do, and that this was further evidence the jokes should stop, not evidence of anything beyond what I had already explained. He said that was one interpretation. He said nothing more, picked up his jacket, and said he was stepping out briefly. He did not drive away. I checked from the upstairs window 10 minutes later, and his car was still in the driveway, engine off, door closed. He sat in the front seat with something on his lap. The immunization booklet, I understood much later, which he had removed from the kitchen drawer quietly while I was looking at my phone. He sat for 11 minutes without music, looking through the windscreen at the rosemary bush by the front path and the small ceramic gnome Felix had chosen at a garden centre in the spring. Then he came back inside and I asked if he had gone for a drive. He said it had been brief. I did not notice that his work satchel was heavier when he set it down than when he had carried it out, or that the kitchen drawer where the immunization booklet had lived for 3 years was now, in some small and entirely unregistered way, different. That Sunday I declined Sylvia's monthly dinner. I told Joel I had a headache, which he accepted without argument, and he went with Naomi and Dex. The table at Sylvia's was set with the cream cloth and the good glasses and the smell of roast chicken from the kitchen. Midway through the main course, Naomi said there was something she needed to play, and she turned her phone toward Joel and Sylvia and played 43 seconds of audio. The dining room held very quiet while it ran. When it ended, Sylvia set her fork down with the precise action of someone managing the amount of noise she made, and asked one question: whether Felix used Kieran's name before Joel's in any other setting, not just in a joke. Joel looked at the tablecloth. Sylvia nodded once. Dex studied his water glass. Naomi said nothing further, and the roast chicken cooled in the kitchen, and nobody suggested a second serving. When Joel came home and I asked how it went, and he said fine, and I told him I knew about the clip because Andy had said Naomi played it, he confirmed this without elaborating. I reframed immediately. I said Sylvia and Naomi had always treated me as a guest in the family rather than its centre, and that if Joel could not defend me in his own mother's house, the real problem was not my friendship with Kieran, but his relationship with his family's opinions. He listened. Then he said something I had not expected. He said that was a fair thing to feel, and she could raise it with him when she was ready. But he was asking a different and more specific question, and the question about Naomi and Sylvia was not the same question. He said this and went upstairs. The fourth step made its sound. I stood in the hallway and tried to work out whether him agreeing with the secondary point was a concession or a form of patience I had not yet correctly categorized. After I went to bed, Joel went to the home office nook under the stairs and turned on the lamp. At 11:22 p.m., the compact printer on the shelf ran 3 pages. He placed them in a manila folder labelled Utilities in his standard household handwriting and slid the folder behind the regular file stack so it sat flush. A calendar notification appeared on his phone and was dismissed quickly. The lamp went off. I came down for a glass of water and found the nook dark and empty. I told myself the weaponized empathy had moved something. He had agreed with the secondary point, and that was movement. I went back upstairs and let the fourth step make its sound beneath me. On Wednesday afternoon, I was loading groceries at Farrelly's when I heard my name. Dottie Henshaw was 4 feet away between the cart return and her car, pleasantly unhurried, a canvas bag in each hand. She said she did not want to interfere and had always liked me very much. She said she wanted me to know that between last September and this past May, she had observed Kieran Lau's slate-grey hatchback parked in our driveway on 17 occasions she could name, all between 8:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon, all on days when Joel's car was absent. And she had the dates written down. She said she was not planning to do anything with the information, but wanted me to know it existed before somebody else asked her about it. She put her bags in her car and drove away. I stood in the parking lot with my keys and told myself she was a retired woman with too much time and too clear a sightline. I believed this for the entire drive home. On Thursday morning, I was in the dental office break room with Bex when Oren came in to make tea and took the chair by the window. I described the situation to both of them in the comfortable register of someone talking about someone else's unreasonable behavior, and I used the exact phrase that I had been using privately to myself, that Joel had raised the idea of a lab test, like we were on a television program. Beck said that was genuinely unhinged, and it clearly said more about him than about me. Oren sipped his tea without commenting and went back to the treatment room. Petra Henshaw passed the break room doorway carrying an autoclave tray. She did not pause. She had heard every word, and by that evening Dottie knew what I had said, through a route that required no effort on anyone's part. On Saturday evening, Andy had 6 people over. Marco, 2 other couples, Ren and Sasha, Yusuf and Femi, and me. The apartment was warm with gathered conversation, and I had 2 glasses of wine in me, and the room was attentive, which are the conditions under which I perform best. Marco, who had heard Kieran's name without the context behind it, asked who he was, and I gave the group the full joke the way I always gave it. Kieran was basically Felix's backup daddy, which made Joel the legal footnote in 6-point font. I said it with the timing and the chin tilt and the expectation that the room would respond the way rooms had responded before. Marco laughed. Ren laughed. Andy did not. Femi did not. Sasha looked at her drink. Yusuf looked at Andy. Andy said in a flat tone I had never heard from her in 11 years of friendship that the joke was getting a bit old. I told her it was less a joke than an accurate description of the dynamic. She said she was not sure the dynamic was what I thought it was. I went to the kitchen for more wine, and when I came back she was on her phone and did not look up immediately, and the conversation moved to other things and did not return to this one. When I left at 10:30, she said goodbye from the sofa without walking me to the door, which had never happened before. What I did not know, Ren was Petra Henshaw's cousin by marriage. The phrase legal footnote moved through the neighbourhood by the following morning through a route so ordinary it barely registered as communication. On Sunday morning, Joel was trimming the rosemary bush when Dottie passed with Archie. She told him she had spoken to me at Farrelly's on Wednesday and was willing to repeat everything in more detail to whoever needed to hear it. She said she had already prepared the written account, in case he asked, and was prepared to sign it. He thanked her. She walked on. He stood for a moment with a small sprig of rosemary between his fingers before going inside. Friday evening, I drove to my parents' house and sat in the den with my mother and described the situation as I understood it. A husband so insecure about my independence that he had involved our neighbour, suggested a lab test, and was treating a series of jokes as a formal complaint. My father sat in the armchair and listened without once saying yes, or that sounds right. My mother said she would call Sylvia. I said that was exactly what I needed. She called Sylvia the following morning. Sylvia had seen the BBQ clip. My mother had not, and the call did not produce the alliance I expected. The following Saturday night, Felix was in bed and the house was quiet in the way it had been getting steadily quieter for weeks. Joel sat across from me at the kitchen table with his hands folded and said he was going to say one thing and then stop asking conversationally. He listed the attempts he had made. The playground, the living room after the screenshot, the kitchen table that first Saturday, the hallway after the BBQ, the sofa after the daycare. He said he was not building a case, but he had a son and a marriage, and he did not want to arrive at a conclusion by default. He said this was the last time he would offer a direct conversation. His final question. Given Dottie's written account, given Ms. Prout's signed record, given the BBQ clip, what did she think an independent person reading all of that would conclude, and was she comfortable with that conclusion landing from the current record with nothing from her side? I looked at him across the kitchen table for a moment longer than I usually allowed silences to run. Then I said he had been spending too much time with his mother, his sister, and a retired neighbour with a terrier and a notebook, and that a record built from barbecue jokes, a 3-year-old's vocabulary, and a woman who timed parked cars was not something that required a response from me. I said the conversation was over. He sat at the table after I moved to the sink, picked up his phone, and sent one short text to a contact listed in his phone as 2 initials and a number. He said goodnight. He went upstairs. 1, 2, 3, the 4th step, 5. The next morning he was at the front door at 7 with his satchel, and he turned and said, in a tone that sounded less like language, and more like the closing of something, that he would be handling things through the right process from here, and he hoped she had a good morning. The door opened. On the key hook where 4 keys had always hung, there was now a 5th, a small flat key, different in colour, belonging to the Home Office nook drawer. 1 second. The door closed. At 8:05 on a Tuesday, the practice ran its usual rhythm. Scheduling software open, Bex at the adjacent station, 3 patients in the chairs. 8 minutes in, a woman who was not a patient stood at the narrow ledge between the sign-in clipboard and the reminder shelf and said my full legal name. I confirmed it. She placed 2 sealed envelopes on the ledge and stated, in a voice that carried to the waiting chairs without effort, that she was serving notice of a motion to establish true parentage with respect to Felix Mara, with a court-issued DNA testing order and a lab appointment the following Thursday at 9 at the Millhaven Testing Centre. Separate notice had already been served that morning to Kieran Lau at his registered studio. She noted the time, left a solicitor's contact letter, and stepped back. I opened the evidence summary. Exhibit A, the BBQ audio clip, 43 seconds, 14 witnesses. Exhibit B, Ms. Prout's signed safeguarding record. Exhibit C, Dottie Henshaw's signed account, 17 dates. Exhibit D, the group chat, screenshot, Thursday, 11:47 a.m. Exhibit E, the Sunridge Daycare emergency contact form, listing Kieran Lau as Felix's secondary contact, date of addition noted. That line I read twice. I had added him to the form 18 months ago without a second thought, because he was obviously the right person to call. It had not occurred to me how much obviously was carrying. I said to the room that a series of jokes had been badly misread. The crossword woman looked up once. Bex offered me a moment away from the desk. I said I was fine. What I understood standing there. I had believed a laughing room was protection. A man who sits quietly in a parked car for 11 minutes and moves one document without announcing it does not need to overstate anything. Every time I delivered the joke, I was also extending the exhibit list. The confidence I thought was armour had assembled the case. Closure snapshot. The lab appointment is Thursday at 9. Felix's Bluebird group continues because Ms. Prout is excellent and there is no reason to change what he knows. The group chat has 7 members. Kieran left without announcement, then sent one message saying space was probably best. The word space sits above 3 unanswered texts. Andy has not called. Dottie walks Archie past the house every morning. The Kieran card with the hand-drawn sun came off the refrigerator, the same week Joel came home from Sylvia's dinner. And this is where it ends. Not with a confrontation, but with a Thursday appointment and the quiet of a thread that used to find everything funny.